Hello, Streakers. It's Jami doing the intro today. So we're excited to talk to you today about motivation and momentum, or in other words, fireworks and the flywheel. So we're going to have an awesome conversation today. So let's get streaking. Are you ready, Jeff?
That was really good, Jami.
Thanks. That was my first intro.
I was in all of our podcasts.
I know.
Let's see here. We've been doing this now for almost 2 years with over 200 episodes, more than 250 episodes or more. And I think we're just shy of 250 episodes.
We have 200, over 200. Yeah.
Yeah. You're so funny.
And I introed.
You introed. Woo! High five. Woo! So as we are in February of this year, and Jami and I were talking a little bit about this, we've been talking with you about energy and saying that we're going to talk about energy. And as we were discussing what we wanted to talk with you about today, we realized that for us, February is like the doldrums. In other words, the wind has ceased, the ship is on the ocean, and there is nothing moving.
Yes. Which has been an interesting place to be when we're like, let's talk about energy. when I've been feeling a complete and total lack of energy
well,
recently.
Let's just say, like, for example, let's just go with our running for this week. It's been overcast most of the time.
Yes.
It's been 19 degrees or lower. If you've been watching on the Streaking app, you've seen a couple of posts that I've put out there in regards to full face mask, head, the cap, the stocking cap is low over my face as I could possibly get. 3 layers, base layer. I mean,
it's just been cold, and we don't have a treadmill. So everything is outside, which actually most of the time I love.
We've talked about getting a treadmill. We've talked about joining a gym so that we could do that.
But I love getting outside most of the time. But the last week and a half, specifically this last week, was hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard. Yeah. I was so tired of putting on a base layer to go outside.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm not feeling the motivation. And then we had one day.
Yesterday.
We had one day that was so windy. It was windy all through the night, and then bitterly cold windy. And I thought, my motivation right now has to do with a blanket and some chocolates and a movie.
Exactly.
That's where my motivation is.
Exactly.
And so
as you think about motivation and what it is that motivates you, one of the areas that we talked a lot about, I was talking with this about my sales team this morning, is what is it that motivates you, and not necessarily on a daily basis. That's what I'm looking at. What is it that an event that's happened in your life that you've been like, wow, I am fully motivated? So for me, for example, I want you to think of one, if you can think of one. For me, for example, is when I went to a seminar by Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar was the motivational guru, has been, always will be, is phenomenal. He was really the one that started the motivational speaking movement. And I went to one of his seminars, and I came out of it just fully motivated. I mean, like through the roof, ready to take on any obstacle, tackle anything that was in my way. And within about 2 days, all that had
fizzled
and died. I mean, I wanted to write a book, for example, after I got out of this, and I thought, I can do this, write a page a day. And I got into about 2 sentences of it and realized that I cannot do this. And all of that motivation was dried up in an instant. Mm-hmm. It was, again, like the doldrums, where the wind, the sails were out. I was ready to sail the open blue, and the wind had ceased. So what was it that happened? Now, have you had a motivational moment like that?
Yeah, I was thinking, I can't think of one specifically, but similar to you, where I've been to a women's conference where I left and was really motivated to make changes. I feel like I'm motivated at different times. So the first of the year is motivating for me. I am inspired by a clean calendar, I'm inspired by things being organized. And the first of the year is ultimately organized because everything is ahead of you. You haven't messed it up yet. And so I'm inspired by that feeling of order. And I'm inspired when I see really organized closets and things like that. But life isn't always that way. Mm-hmm. Life isn't an organized closet. It's difficult.
And which is why we look at an organized closet. It's difficult.
Because I look at it and I think I can have a perfectly organized closet as long as I never use it. And nobody else ever uses it. So it's kind of a metaphor for life. It's like you can be perfectly motivated as long as it stays in that one place. But as soon as life happens and you actually have to start using the things in your life.
I remember watching the show where the they went over to a person's house and she had covered all of her furniture in plastic.
Yes.
And the person went to sit down. She's like, oh,
No. Not for sitting. Yes.
We can't cover our life in plastic.
No.
And we get motivated through different things. The motivation goes away. That's why we call it the motivation is a firework. When you go to a firework display, it's beautiful. It's awesome. You come away from it completely inspired. In fact, I asked my sales team and a few other people, what is the definition of motivation? Mm-hmm. And one of the overall definition, it came back as someone or something that inspires you to action.
Yep.
Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
So someone or something that inspires you to action. Zig Ziglar, for me, inspired me to action. An organized, clean calendar inspires you to action. Someone or something that inspires you to action. The interesting thing about the motivation is it fades and fades quickly. Sometimes it's a little bit more slowly, but it fades quickly. So the question then is how do you use motivation to transfer to momentum? And momentum is a lot different.
I was going to say, I would like to define, because motivation is the idea of things of why you do the things you do, and that propels you to keep doing them.
Right.
My challenge is that sometimes we can lose track of the why in the day-to-day, but also I think the challenge is keeping that, like, how do you be motivated when you're not motivated? It's an interesting thing, and it's a challenge to look at it and say, well, I want to. So I think about what you talk about when you say motivation is like a firework. And I think about when I see fireworks, and the two favorite times for me are the 4th of July and Disneyland, because they are amazing times to see fireworks. But anytime you see a fireworks show, it really is inspiring. It's amazing. It's a really fun thing to watch. But like you said, then it fades out, and you're not at that level of awe anymore. However, there's a place for that awe. I think that there's a place to be like, I wouldn't want to eliminate fireworks shows because they don't last forever. I'm like, I love watching them. They have a place, but recognizing that I can't light a firework every time I need to get myself to do something. Yeah. I'm not going to be seeing a fireworks show every time I need to be moving, right. Every time I need to understand the motive behind why I'm doing what I'm doing. I need something more.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's where we started talking about momentum and the difference. And the reason that this whole podcast came about, aside from the fact that we've been thinking about it, is we actually had a streaker comment and say, streaking to me has helped me maintain my momentum, which is different than motivation. And she said, I think you should do a podcast talking about momentum and motivation. So here we are. Shout out to you, Rose.
Yeah. There we go. As you think about momentum, Jim Collins wrote a book, Good to Great, about the flywheel of business. Now, what is a flywheel? Flywheel is a very heavy, round, or circular disc that's about 2 feet wide, weighs about 5,000 pounds. And a flywheel is used to keep things going, but to get a flywheel going requires a lot of pushing. In fact, I'm going to quote just a little bit out of Jim Collins' book on Good to Great. And I need to set it up just a little bit before I give you the actual quote. He talks about in his book about the flywheel and how you get the flywheel of success going. Now, he says it's in business. We're going to talk about it in life. The flywheel of success in your life, how do you get that going? And he said, it's going to require pushing, constant pushing. And you're going to start pushing every day with 1 push, 2 push, 3 push, whatever it is. And then you keep on going. And eventually your flywheel makes it all the way for 1 rotation. Now, remember, this is a very large object and very huge and very difficult to push.
Can I just say I appreciate, though, that it talks about that it takes a bit of time before it makes 1 rotation?
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Right. So as you think about it, then it makes a rotation. You keep pushing, and there's 100 pushes, 1,000 pushes, 10,000 pushes. As you keep on pushing, eventually there's at some point where this great big heavy flywheel now takes a momentum of its own, and there's a breakthrough. And instead of the pushes now necessarily getting it moving, the pushes keep it moving and keep it moving faster. Now, let's suppose someone came to you and said, man, you have a really successful life. It's so great. What push was it? Was it the first one? Was it the fifth one? Was it the 100th, the 100,000th? And this is what Jim Collins says. Now I'm going to quote directly from him. No, it was all of them added together in an overall accumulation of effort applied in a consistent direction. Some pushes may have been bigger than others, but any single heave, no matter how large, reflects a small fraction of the entire cumulative effect upon the flywheel. You're pushing no harder than during the first rotation, but the flywheel goes faster and faster. Each turn of the flywheel builds upon work done earlier, compounding your investment of effort. 1,000 times faster, 10,000, then 100,000. The huge heavy disc flies forward with almost unstoppable momentum. That's the end of the quote.
That's great. I love because the question that you asked is, well, which push was it? And I think of two reasons that we would ask that question. One, can I skip all the previous pushes that don't count and just get to the one that matters?
That's good.
Or two, exactly how many pushes am I going to have to do before I have to stop thinking about this? Like, give me a number so that I've got in my mind exactly how long I need to do this. And then I can be like, okay, that's success.
That's a little allusion to habit.
It is. It's a little, but it's an interesting thing that we want to get to this place where we're like, tell me which one is the right one, and I can skip to that and just do that part. And what he's saying is there isn't any one right push. So it's deeply profound in my mind that it's all of them added together in an overall accumulation of effort applied in a consistent direction. Can I just take a stop here for a second and think, I wonder how long he took getting that quote in place because of the amount, the conciseness of words. To be able to communicate something in that way is really hard. And he did a really good job. Because what you've got there is
probably
that...
why he's a world-renowned authority and best-selling author.
He did a really good job.
Good job, Jim.
But it's this idea that an overall accumulation, so it's not just one push. Not any one push was more important than any other push. And it's effort.
Right.
There's no easy way around it. Each push is taking effort. And that effort is applied in what? A consistent direction. You're consistently going in that same direction. And when you put all of those things together, all of a sudden you can start to have, not all of a sudden, but you have momentum.
So interesting.
I guess it feels all of a sudden.
It feels like, wow, all of a sudden, because that's why he asked the question,
which push is it? Yeah.
Because you have this breakthrough and it really is a ludicrous answer. It's a ludicrous.
Well, it's that idea of the tipping point that you build, and then eventually something does tip. And I think the same thing happens in a flywheel. You're building and building that momentum and you're pushing, and eventually you get to this tipping point where the weight of the wheel is starting to work with you. Mm-hmm. And now it does seem like, oh, all of a sudden I hit that tipping point.
Right.
But really there is no one thing that did it. It's the accumulation of all of them put together, including effort and consistent direction.
Yeah. So if we unpack this and continue to unpack it just a little bit further, when you look at, so for example, some pushes may have been bigger than others, but any single heave, no matter how large, reflects a small fraction of the entire cumulative effect upon the flywheel. The reason I unpack that just a little bit more is when you start to now look at streaking and consider a laughably simple activity that I do daily, that's the pushes. And there are some days that I am more motivated to push a little bit further, faster than I am on other days. But the push is the streak. The motivation may be I do something a little bit more on one day. However, I already have the floor of the streak. So for example, let's just go to writing for a second. So when I came away from that Zig Ziglar conference, I wanted to write a book and I was like, write a page a day, and I couldn't do it. Much later on in life, I said, okay, what is the streak that I need to do in order to set up a floor of success? And that was to write at least one sentence every day. That became the floor that I then stood on for the days when I was motivated to do something a little bit more. I already had a floor of success and I could write a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, or even a page.
Right. The thing that's fascinating about it too, and I was thinking about this, is that I think those days that are big are a little bit like the firework in the sense that I enjoy a firework. And when I have fireworks in my life, like something that's like, wow, I set off that firework. You feel proud of yourself. You're excited. You're like, wow, it's really great. So when he said this, some pushes may have been bigger than others, but any single heave, no matter how large, reflects a small fraction of the entire cumulative effect. That struck me because I thought, we want the larger pushes to have bigger impact.
Yeah.
And
That's a
he's
good point.
saying
Yes.
that even no matter how large each single push is, it still reflects a small fraction of the entire
Did you just
wheel.
come up with these off the top of your head? I mean,
Well, I was just
that
thinking
one right
about
there.
it.
I mean, you just think about what you just said. We want the large pushes to be the things that make all the difference.
We do. What I'm thinking about is running, because this last week I've had a couple successes and a couple what I would say not failures but challenges. Floors.
You've been on
Yes,
the floor.
I've had several days of the floor and one day of a really huge success. And I wanted that huge success to mean more. I wanted it to last longer. I wanted it to have more impact on my running. I wanted it to mean more. And what he's saying is all of it still just reflects that small fraction of the entire cumulative effect. So then I was thinking, well, then what's the point of the big successes? Those big, so I'm looking at my big run. I'm like, well, then what's the point of pushing myself for that big run? And I thought, well, there's a couple things that are good. When we push ourselves, we feel good about ourselves. And there's times like when you were talking about writing your book where you are able to write for a really long period of time and you get done and you think, wow, that was very fulfilling and not as hard as sometimes it is. And to appreciate those moments. But to recognize that those moments are still just part of a bigger picture and they're not any more important than the day that you showed up and did the one sentence. That the whole thing is part of a cumulative effort moving in a direction. That's very powerful, but also a bit of a mind shift.
Total mind shift and a mind blow when you really start to think about it. Because a couple of things that you said that sparked a few thoughts in me was, one, the word just. The word just is one of those that I just have a hard time with. Because what it does is dismiss the work and the effort of the consistency and the consecutiveness. Well, I just wrote a sentence. Or this was just part of the whole thing. No, it is part of the entire effort. And therefore, there's no just about it. The thing is that you did it, whether it be a big push or a small push.
You pushed.
You pushed, and it was all part of the combined effort. What I see is the small fraction of the entire cumulative effect upon the flywheel. What is the flywheel? What is the whole thing? That is the overall streak. It's the number of days that you've been keeping it going. That's where you start to see real reward. And on some of those days, like what you were just explaining, you had some really great outcomes.
Yes.
And on other of those days, you were pushing it like you would, because it says, as he continued with just unpacking this quote a little bit further, you're pushing no harder than during the first rotation. That's kind of interesting to think about, because the big heavy flywheel, huge, you think you're pushing really, really hard the very first, second, and third push to get that thing going.
Oh, that's a good point. You feel like you're really having to push hard to get it going.
Which what he's suggesting here, and what I look at as well, is make it laughably simple, because it's the pushing really hard is I'm doing this every day, every week, every month. And any one of those pushes start you going, but to really get the flywheel moving, it's thousands of pushes, or hundreds of pushes, or days of pushing, whatever it is. That's what gets it going. And then you start to see this momentum. We often talk about in the book how it takes about 90 to 100 days to really start to feel the breakthrough. You may start to see results within 30 days of whatever your streak is, but to really feel like you've got the flywheel of your success moving, It usually is 90 to 100 days or a little bit longer. But then once you catch that and once you feel that flywheel moving in your life, you're like, oh boy, I can set a streak on so many things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's what's, as we were been reading this, I'm visualizing this big flywheel and being a smaller person walking up to a big wheel and thinking, is it possible for someone of my stature to move something that big? And thinking about how often we feel about those things in our life where when you start something new or when you start something that you know is important, but you haven't been successful at it, sometimes you can feel like a small person approaching this big, heavy wheel and thinking, do I have the ability to make that move? Like, how is that going to work?
Right.
And so him being able to say, look, the pushing is no harder during the first rotation, but the flywheel starts to pick up momentum. And I thought, that's very encouraging for these big things in our life that feel like these giant wheels that we're like, how are we ever going to get this moving? How am I ever going to get this to be something that's actually happening? And the streak is the how.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. And I love that the science of a flywheel is the same as the science of success in our life, that it's that you will be able to keep moving through these small, consistent efforts.
Continuing forward, each turn of the flywheel builds upon work that was done earlier, compounding your investment of effort. Again, each one of these sentences is just loaded with information in the background, because now I think about the compounding effect of a streak and how, as I continue to do the laughably simple activity, it compounds through time. I was talking this morning to a streaker who is like, I've had this vitamin jar for 5 years, and I set a streak to take at least one vitamin daily. She's almost at a year of doing that. She's like, it's the first time I've ever emptied a vitamin bottle.
I remember that feeling.
Do you really?
Yes. Where the first time that I was like, I ordered these iron tablets and I have to reorder them. Like I took them all. Instead of them being like the telltale heart that sits in your drawer, always reminding you that you haven't done it. It's a great feeling. And exactly the vitamins are such a great analogy because you can't take 10 of them and be good for 10 days. You have to take one a day. Every day. And so it is really the true visual of this compound investment that you're building upon what you've done earlier.
Well, isn't some of the vitamins that you're taking right now, they really don't take effect until after 90 days?
Yes, like you have to have them in your system for a certain period of time, and then you start to build up the momentum of the vitamin, and it works in your body.
It's really amazing to think about that compound investment of effort comes through time, which is again leads back to one of what we were saying before as far as the streak. You stick with it, and every single push builds on the previous push. Mm-hmm. Every single day builds on the previous day, or every single week builds on the previous week. And as you do those pushes, then eventually the flywheel starts to work for you, which gets us to the final thing, which is it flies forward with almost unstoppable momentum. I appreciate that he included the word almost. Mm-hmm. Because there is no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. It doesn't exist. And to think that now this flywheel is just on automatic. Mm-hmm. I'm just improving my life every single day without even thinking about it. It's not true.
No.
Because I'm continuing those pushes every single day. They work better for me than or I shouldn't say they work better for me. The flywheel works for me and it compounds, but it's working together now to keep that going.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about a conversation we had on one of our streaking meetings last week that one of the, Marty on our team said, I just want to take a moment and remind us that streaking is all about who we're becoming. And he said, if we can just really harness and understand the power that's behind that we're doing these things because we're striving to become something. We're striving to become a kind of person that we've decided we want to be. And I was thinking about this today when we were on our walk. And you have a new streak, relatively new, of to pick up a piece of trash each day. And you've been often combining that with when we go out on a walk or a run or when you're doing it on your own. And today we came across a big, huge bag. We had a really windy day the other day, so there was a lot of trash out. What was the bag? It wasn't fertilizer, but it was a big...
No, it was a big bag of pet food.
Yes, so like a big, huge empty bag of dog food. And that was just, and you picked it up. And it was fun because it was big. So it's not a tiny piece of trash. It's a big piece of trash.
It's a big piece of trash.
But it's interesting to think about picking up trash as one single person. What difference are you making in the world? And I thought about it and I'm like, you're making a small difference. If truth be told, of the billions of people that live on this planet, only one person picks up trash. You're making a very infinitesimal difference. However, there's two things that are happening here. One, as you pick up that trash, you're picking it up not just to pick up the trash, but because it displays the kind of person that you want to be. A person that cares about your environment and the place that you live in, and that you want to be a person that contributes, that you want to be someone who notices trash, first of all. You want to be someone who stops and takes time to pick it up. You want to be someone who's okay picking up trash that you didn't make. All of these things are part of a whole of who you want to become. And then that in turn inspires other people and can be motivating to action, that then they can start a streak, which will allow them to have momentum, to allow that motivation of being inspired when you see somebody else to be moved to action, but to able to continue to maintain that action in your life. So I just wanted to stop for a second and remind us, and remind myself sometimes, that all of these things that I'm doing with a streak, if you stop for a second and think about, why am I doing that? What is the purpose of my streak? It reminds you of, well, it's because I want to become this kind of person. And then all of a sudden, picking up a piece of trash can mean a whole lot more. It means a lot of different things in one small, simple action that you did yesterday, and you did today, and you're going to do tomorrow. And today it was a big piece of trash, and tomorrow it may be a small piece of trash. But in the end, it's this flywheel of who I want to become. And it's just kind of a beautiful thing, I think.
The flywheel of success in each of our lives is pushed forward by the streaks that we choose to do. Mm-hmm. And this is where I want to end with today is we also talk a lot about the intentionality. If you've watched our series of streaking shorts that have come out, Streakin, who's represented as her persona is, fantastic. And she represents this idea of living intentionally. Mm-hmm. And that simple, intentional act every single day is the push on the flywheel of your life. When you are intentional, you're looking at everything that you're doing in a way that's positive, in a way that is motivating. You mentioned about how you were motivated by me picking up this piece of trash, and others could be as well. Well, I was motivated by other people doing that. And as you set this streak forward, then what happens is you, in your own personal life, begin to get this momentum that you want to share with others. Mm-hmm. That's the huge part too, is you want to start sharing it.
Right.
Because it inspired you, and you want to share that inspiration and celebrate it with others.
Yep. Which
is really cool. So as you think about, for example, the streaks in your life, the intentional things that you choose to do on a regular basis, there are some times where it is going to be the doldrums of life, where the winds of motivation are not blowing.
The fireworks have come and passed.
And now what you need to do is decide, am I going to continue to push the flywheel? Mm-hmm. And by having a streak, the streak in and of itself helps you make that decision on a daily basis. There have been many a time where I've been tired or sick or down or any of those things. And I thought, you know what? Do I want to give up the streak? And it's a serious question. I mean, you asked that question this week.
I did. Yesterday, when it was really windy and freezing cold, I got out of bed and said, maybe I'll just quit my
Maybe
walk
today's the
streak.
day.
Today's
I'm done
the
with
day.
the streak.
Done with it. But then you look at what you're throwing away. I looked at what I was throwing away and I thought, I can't do that.
Not yet. I mean, not yet. There may
not
be
for
a
this
day.
one.
Yeah, not for this one. There may be a day where you say, you know what? It is time to end that.
Yeah.
But not yet. And
because it's helping me become who I want to be. It is continuing.
In that moment, the flywheel, the momentum of the flywheel carried you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a little push, and the momentum of your flywheel of success carried you further down the path. And there's some days where you add to the flywheel and add to the momentum of the flywheel. And that's all part of streaking. Every single part of that.
I think what I've loved most about our discussion today is a lot of times people will say things like, oh, well, you're just checking the box. And I know we're adamant to say, yeah, it's okay to check the box. I do love the visual of if you're struggling and feeling like, oh, I'm just checking the box. Maybe you change that visual in your head and say, no, I pushed the flywheel today. I gave that flywheel a push.
That's really good.
And it's a neat visual to look at and think, that's what I did today. And maybe it was a hard push and maybe it was a soft push, but it was a push. And the cumulative effort of those pushes are putting me in the direction that I want to go to become the person that I want to be.
Fireworks and Flywheels. They work together in your life to help you to become who you want to be. We'd love to have you join the Streaking app and share with us any of the momentum building moments that you've had as you look at the different streaks that you set. The Streaking app is fantastic. You'll see all kinds of people that are doing all kinds of different things in their lives. And we'd love for you to adopt the streak to pick up at least one piece of trash. We'd invite you to do that on a daily basis. You can join that streak, and there's a community in there that talks about picking up at least one piece of trash. And you can adopt that streak, and we can do that together, moving forward together. Download the Streaking app at the Apple App Store or at Google Play, either one of them, and you can use it there. You can also get a hold of Jami or I. Now, we've recently changed our email addresses to Jeffrey, Jeffrey, so same as far as just first name, at thestreakingapp.com. So we're not using Streaking Mastery anymore. We've now changed everything to thestreakingapp.com. So it's Jeffrey, Jeffrey, at thestreakingapp.com, or
Jami, Jami, at thestreakingapp.com.
So if you'd like to get a hold of us, you can certainly send it out. The book is always phenomenal to read. All the methodology that goes into streaking and how to set up successful streaks in your life. You can do that at Barnes & Noble or buy the book. You can do that. You can buy the book at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or anywhere books are sold, until we talk with you again and we talk with you about our flywheel of success.
Keep pushing that flywheel and keep streaking.
Better you